Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Audacity Academy. I am, as always, your host, SarahRFalciani. I'm so excited y'all are here. And guess what? I have another guest. I'm talking to another person. We have another conversation to bring to you, and I'm so excited. This guest is amazing. She is a yoga teacher, officiant. She calls herself a spiritual pastor. I've never heard anyone refer to themselves as a spiritual pastor before. She's a successful coach, and she blends humor and spirituality to bring her clients towards living a more empowered life. Her name is Vera Lester, and I am going to go ahead and let her further introduce herself. Go ahead, Vera, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Sarah, so much. It's funny. It took me a really long time to say spiritual pastor out loud in front of strangers.
Uh-huh.
I have known the whole time that that's what I was doing. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But, it's really about like, how do we, our generation especially, we got disillusioned with church. We like saw what was actually happening. And so we stepped away from that, but we still have this deep need to be, really to see ourselves as humans, and we always say like human beings instead of
Yep.
human doings, right? That
Mm-hmm.
there is this inherent value that we all have. And I believe that we all have a search for meaning happens in our lives. And so for me, it's like, what that means to each individual person is different. I'm not interested in people believing exactly what I believe. Frankly, what I believe has changed even in the last 8 years, as long as I've been doing this. I'm much more interested in helping people ask really powerful questions than about delivering answers to them. If you take spiritual and pastor and put them together, that's really the work that I do. So yes, I officiate weddings, although I only do about one a month of those. And I spend most of my time now as a coach. And I'm really passionate now about helping people find meaningful work. I used to split before the pandemonium. I split my time 50-50 basically between being a yoga teacher and being a coach. In the obviously like lockdown and all of that stuff, I shifted more and more to coaching. And so that combined with things like the Great Resignation and like everybody coming out of whatever we're coming out of, and going like, I want to change my life. I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
great, let's go do that. Like, let's
Yeah.
recreate something that's really deeply meaningful to you.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So do you work with your clients mostly one-on-one?
I do. I work almost exclusively one-on-one with clients, with the exception, obviously, of couples,
Mm-hmm.
and yoga classes. I'm in the process right now of developing a group coach, like a group coaching
Mm-hmm.
that has been. I keep like starting it and then holding it back because it's not quite ready to be born. But one of the things that I know for sure is that when people are coming out of a really toxic job environment, they want to make a change and they have like a big dream that they have convinced themselves is impossible. I know that
Mm-hmm.
you've seen that over and over again.
Absolutely.
Or if they like really want to start a business or they really like want to work for themselves and they're like, but here are the things I do, but nobody wants that. I can, as their coach all day long, reaffirm those things, but having their peers to go like, oh my gosh, I totally need somebody who is a, whatever it might be. Like, I really need somebody who, specializes in WordPress and does X, Y, and Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I really need somebody who's like a nutrition coach, but comes at it from this like more like authentic angle, right? Like
Yeah.
looking at my past history and my trauma. I really need somebody who, does X, Y, and Z. And that there is a community aspect that to me is really important that I'm missing just for my personal self, my professional self, but also that I think is like where I want to go now. But yes.
So how did you discover this work? What made you fall in love with coaching and taking your own career in that direction?
Um, so there are probably two answers to that question. The first is I had my own coach. When I was
Okay.
for 12 years before I became a full-time spiritual pastor, I was a nonprofit fundraiser. So
Mm-hmm.
I worked in New Orleans in the arts. I worked in economic development. I worked for the Young Leadership Council. I ran Wednesday at the Square for a minute, um, and I was really passionate about using people skills, using my relationship building to sort of help grow these mission driven organizations. And after 12 years of that, there's a whole other long story, but after 12 years of that, the closer I got to the job I thought was the perfect job, right? Like on paper, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the job. This is exactly what I want to do. Like the closer and closer, the more and more miserable I was actually.
Mm-hmm.
And the last job that I left, I literally like every morning I would like wake up and like have to give myself a pep talk to get out of bed and to get in the shower and to get dressed. And so a colleague referred me to a career coach in New Orleans who just was an incredible support for me. I was not intending to do what I do now, but I started seeing her in November. The first week of January, I quit my job. I walked into my boss's office and said, I can't do this anymore.
Congratulations.
It was amazing. And I mean, it was terrifying. Everybody, right? I mean, I had a mortgage. I just bought a new car. I was not a starving artist in my 20s anymore. And so this question about like, well, but how am I going to support myself doing that? Obviously was like sort of terrifying. But working with my coach really helped me to kind of struggle, sort of reorient that struggle, get more clear about how I wanted to build the business, how I wanted to approach my work and my clients. And so that was my first experience with coaching. Mm-hmm. And then when I was almost exclusively a yoga teacher for the first 4 years. And when I was working with my private clients, they started coming to me with bigger questions than like tight hamstrings. Initially, I was a little hesitant and I was like, no, this is what a spiritual pastor does. They help people with big questions.
Right.
And because I had a coach, I knew there was a skill set. So
Definitely.
I went my coach training and then started to blend the two and then started coaching exclusively.
What would you say the difference is between the career coach that you had and just calling yourself a career coach and what you are now? Would you say you're a version of a career coach, or do you really? Okay.
Yes.
Can you clarify on that a little
Absolutely.
bit?
I've had this conversation with myself a couple of times recently. Like, I need to be less precious about this. Because, most people go to a career coach, like, expecting someone to like give them feedback on their resume and like help them climb a corporate ladder and like navigate office politics.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do all of those things with my clients, and I have. But what to me, I usually call what I do a meaningful work coach. And for me, it's like I want people to understand from the beginning that I'm not interested in them like getting deeper into the rat race. That's not what answers their heart's call. We have so much pressure from the outside about like what success is, what we're supposed to be doing,
mm-hmm.
right? That like I'm like not one of those people, whatever. But I've gotten like more and more insight recently, and just like real honest with myself that like nobody, in the same way that nobody knows what a spiritual pastor is, right? Like I've never heard that before. Also, nobody knows what a meaningful work coach is. And that's that's what I say. Like, I just have to get, like, I am a career coach. Career and like early stage self-employment too.
To put it in layman's terms, but really, it catches people's attention when you use a phrase or a term or a title that they've never seen before. It makes them ask you, so like a career, just like I did. So it is a career coach, but it seems like there's so much more to it. And it really seems to me like you dig into a client's genuine purpose, like not just a job for the sake of paying the bills. That's not what you're in the business of. You're in the business of helping people who maybe are in a career that they're doing because of like people pleasing, right? Yeah. And they don't know how to step out of that. I love that you act almost as like a bridge to guide them out of that gradually to find their deeper meaning and purpose in life. It's amazing. It's beautiful work.
And I don't think that I could do it if I hadn't made that leap myself.
Sure.
Absolutely. Certainly people come to me and they go like, I see what you have and I want that. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Right.
Yep. And then they hear your story and they're like, yep, absolutely. That's the person for me. She gets me.
Yeah. Yeah. Total recovering type A, recovering high achiever, like recovering people pleaser, 100%.
Where would you say the career that you were in before you were in because someone else told you to, or encouraged you to, or society encouraged you to? Like, what kept you in that for so long?
Such a good question. So many times over the over my life, I had to sort of have a reckoning about like, is this really want, and like making little shifts. I started out in the theater and I wanted to be an
Oh,
actress, right?
interesting.
I wanted to be an actress from the time I was 5 years old, a stage actress, until I was 20. And my undergraduate degree is in theater. Like, God bless my parents. I love them. They let me go to a very elite, expensive university to get a degree in theater, which is really, as I always say, it's a degree in like completing projects under budget and inside of timeline. That's really what I did. But
so welcome to corporate America.
exactly. I mean, so like every time people are like, you have a theater degree, I'm like, let me tell you what that actually means.
Yeah.
I work with really difficult personalities and make sure they get things done. And so there, I mean, even me saying that was like, I had this like, I mean, I think you have some spiritual experience here. Like it was very ego driven, right? You know, I would say to people, oh, I work at the Contemporary Arts Center. I raised money there like during Katrina, right? And the like little boost that I got from like what other people said about that, or how they thought about that, or you know, they looked at me and they thought I was like impressive. And
strokes
then
the ego and keeps you
yeah,
going.
totally. And then working at the YLC, and I love the organization. Their mission is extraordinary. But running Wednesday at the Square was like, I will never do it again. It's like everybody has a really great time except for like 12 people who are running it, making sure everything happens. But I mean, I still say to people like, oh yeah, I used to produce Wednesday at the Square. And they get that little sparkle and they're like, ooh, really?
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I've heard of
that.
that. And I was like, right, yeah, I was on stage with Dr. John. It was great. And I was miserable. I worked at G&O Inc., right? Same thing. People are like, ooh. And all of these things that like looked really impressive from the outside. And so probably what I would say is I was hoping for some sort of external affirmation and approval that would eventually feel like enough to feel good about who I was. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this with your clients. As a result, I didn't actually know who I was, right? Those things weren't as important to me. Again, the core missions of those organizations are still tremendously important to me, but the work itself was not. And worse than that, I didn't like the person I was when I was doing that work. And I don't think I realized how true that was until I started working for myself. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but
what came out of you is what was meant for someone to hear. I can guarantee it. I never, ever worry about that. When you were getting those, the sparkly eye reaction when you were doing these things and everyone telling you, oh, that must be a dream job. You're living the dream. You're doing this. Did you have a voice in the back of your head, almost like telling you, well, I should be grateful. I should stay in this because it's what everyone else wants? Or did you always know I'm not meant to do this?
I always knew. I always knew that like anytime somebody from it's the same way when somebody says to you, when you're feeling really sort of fraught by, people are going to find you out, right? It's like, oh, I know it looks good from the outside. You think I'm good by how I look, but you can't actually see what's going on. You don't actually know. And whether that was about the organization or about myself, that felt very, right? It was like they were just seeing the glossy outside. And what's funny is when you asked me the question, I thought about when I quit my job. And I just started telling, I mean, I was a fundraiser, so I know a lot of people, right? I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love relationships. I'm friendly, right? I live a life from Jazz Fest. I throw great parties. And I would run into people and they'd ask me what was happening. And I said, well, I quit my job without another job. And I don't actually know what I'm doing. Like I might go back to graduate school, but I don't know what I'm doing. And I kept waiting for people to be like, that was a bad choice. You really had a good setup and you just really effed it up. And nobody said that.
No.
Every person, with two exceptions who are still very dear to my heart, everybody said, oh my gosh, that's so brave. I wish I could do that. And it was exactly the same voice in the back of my head saying, you don't know. You have no idea what you're talking about. This is terrible. What am I thinking? This is insane. And I had two like very close guy friends who were like brothers to me, who both were like, but how are you going to pay the mortgage? And I loved that there were, but like really 100 people, 98 people said, oh my God, you're amazing. I wish I could do that. And 2 people said, but how are you going to pay the mortgage?
It's just the right amount of logic, just in there to keep
Yeah,
your
exactly.
feet on the ground, right?
Yeah, do you guys understand that what I have done is completely insane? Completely insane.
So how do you help your clients navigate this same transition?
Yeah. It's interesting because I often, obviously my story comes out early when I start working with clients. And I usually say to them that I don't recommend that people do it the way that I did it. And I also am so profoundly aware how privileged I was to be able to do that. Whether it's that like I had the credit facility to do it, I knew like worst case scenario, like absolute worst case scenario, I could sell my house, right? Like I had some financial backup. And so that's the first piece. What I will say is that if people have that capacity, getting out of a really toxic environment, getting out of a profession that you know is the wrong profession for you, shifts your mindset and your capacity, I think, faster. Because when you're in that 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 or 7 to 8 grind and surrounded by other people who are doing it, it can be very different. It's like incredibly challenging, I think. It like requires an internal fortitude that most people just don't have, to be able to separate themselves from this outside environment and go like, that's actually not what's important to me. And I've also had clients who do it that way, right? And so much of my work is about like, okay, getting crystal clear on your values. So I almost always start there now. What's actually important to you?
Absolutely.
When in your life have you known you were living those values? And how did that feel? And where are the places in your life that you were out of alignment? So that's and that's the where they're out of alignment is usually obviously a much easier question. And then we go through like, okay, what's your secret sauce? You know, what are you uniquely skilled to do? What do you feel called for? What have other people your whole life told you you're good at that you like can't even hear it? And you know, you probably know it's usually something that's so close to you that you can't see it. And we sort of slowly tease that out. And then it's like just gradually and often like in a way that feels really magical, they start like doing little different things and talking to other people and suddenly X, Y, and Z. So like, here's an interesting example of that. I have a client who works in a sort of very well respected white collar field and came to me because, you know, he knew he wanted to make a change, but he wasn't quite sure what that looked like. And he was making a healthy salary and you know, has a family and that was important. And so initially he came to me going like, I need to build confidence because I don't know where I'll go from here. You know? And so instead of looking at, okay, where are you going to go? I was like, okay, zone in. Like, okay, so what are you really excellent at? I like helped him understand that he was an extraordinary manager. And anybody who's worked in an office ever knows that most bosses suck. I am a terrible boss. I sucked at being a boss. I have had so many toxic bosses. Like people are just playing out their childhood trauma at work. And
I was in the Army. Trust me. I get it.
Oh my God. Right? Like just, anyway, yes. So
not all of them were bad, but the vast majority, unfortunately, people who are in positions of leadership definitely have some, they need to, well, they have some soul searching to do.
Well, once I was able to step back and go like, oh, we are playing out our toxic childhood, like family dynamics at work, I suddenly was like so much more compassionate for all of the shitty bosses, excuse my language, I've had, like all of that. I was just like, oh, okay, I get it. But he's extraordinary. Like, he supports his team. He really thinks about what they need. He gives them enough space, but not too much. I mean, he just, like, so much that like the CEO keeps giving him more people to report to him who aren't even, and I was like, hello, you are excellent at this.
Yes.
And he was just like, oh, I'd never really thought about that. And so we really started to lean into that. And he had a couple of other really awesome work wins. And then 3 months ago, he was at a conference, ran into somebody that he knew from, 10 years ago, who said, oh, I've been thinking about you. We're expanding, and I think you'd be perfect.
Oh, perfect. So little manifestation happened in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's an like, often that's how it happens. That's how it happens in romantic relationship. That's how it happens at work. That it's like, once we begin to realize where we're skilled and where we're just weak, and it's okay. We all have limitations. And for me, that's actually where boundaries come in. Once we get really honest with ourselves about those things, then we just show up as ourselves and people see it.
Absolutely. But it's about, we have to shine a light on it ourselves and see it ourselves.
Yes.
Otherwise we're masking it. We have a blanket over it. The rest of the world, and even if the rest of the world saw it, they would like that job offer that he got, or that person who let him know you'd be perfect for this. He might have said that to him before working with you, and he would have been like, oh, no way. I don't manage. That's not what I do. I'm totally not available for that. So it's amazing how you were able to open him up to that opportunity. Definitely. Yeah. So going back to you said boundaries really come in.
Yes.
Since this is a boundaries podcast, we have to lean on that. So let's dig into some boundaries talk.
You said you wanted to talk about boundaries, and I was like, me. Like,
I love it. It's my favorite topic in the whole wide world.
I have been called a boundary ninja by one of my dearest friends. And it's like, of all of the things, it's the thing that just feels really empowering and great. So before I set a boundary for myself, or like work with boundaries with clients, for me, the first question is like, what are your natural limitations? When do you start to break down? When do you get so emotional that you can't continue to operate in a way that you feel proud of, right? So, like, example of that is, I can only write in the morning. Just the way that my brain works. I'm not creative. I have a harder time with language afternoon. So I must have time in the morning to write. That means I can't have clients in the morning. That means I can't have anything else on my calendar in the morning, because in order to be in that space, I have to have that clear boundary. So that's that might seem not like a boundary to other people. But to me, time is the first place that we look.
Absolutely.
And because the other thing is, the hugest part of my healing journey was learning to trust myself. And I said to you, for me, I really feel like boundaries are about self-trust. It's like the cornerstone of self-trust. The thing about being in a job for 12 years where I just kept pushing myself. I just kept building my resume, or trying to be more impressive, or whatever, and completely abandoning myself, completely ignoring how miserable I was. Stepping out of that is I don't trust myself to take care of myself anymore. I don't trust myself to do what's best for me. And, I'm a single woman who lives alone. If nobody else I can't trust anybody else to do that, because in the end, none of us can trust anybody else to do that. We have to know, I have to know I've got my back. That beginning to set those little boundaries were essential for me in rediscovering and really learning that I could take care of myself, and that I was trustworthy to take care of myself.
And you have to start small. So many times clients come to me, students come to me, and they'll message me, or they'll be talking to me, and they're like, how do I set a boundary in with that person in that situation. And it's like, they never, ever want to hear it. And I'm like, but we're not going to worry about the other person right now. We're going to bring it back. And how can you start setting boundaries with yourself? Out of all the people, like, don't worry about how they're going to react. Let's start setting boundaries with you and see how you react and how
Yes.
you handle it.
Yes.
And that's how you start working on your relationship with yourself. Like you were saying, you have
Great.
to create, you work on your relationship with yourself first. When you are grounded in that self-trust, in that confidence, it becomes so much easier to start focusing on relationships with work, relationships with boss, relationships with dating, or with your significant others, relationships in parenting. It all starts with your relationship with yourself. And it sounds like you nailed that one.
And I know, like,
of course,
your clients don't want to hear it.
No,
they're like, no, we need to fix that person.
Yeah, I have a shitty boss. Can we just deal with this, please?
How do I fix them?
Well, my boyfriend cheated on me. Can we please just fix my relationship? And I'm like, but let's hold a mirror up in front of you first, and let's explore that one. But that's why people come to coaches, right? Some people might come to coaches and therapists for us to tell them what they want to hear, but that's not what we're in the business of. We tell them what they need to hear.
It's funny. An old yoga teacher used to say, like, you sell people what they want, and then
you give them what they need. Exactly.
And that's really, and it's fascinating because for me as a coach, depending on the client, anywhere from 50 to 80% of the work I do is affirming that what you're doing is valuable, that who you are is worthy, that I see you working, that this is hard.
Yep.
And it's extraordinary how that simple, right? I mean, like coach language of like unconditional positive regard will
and validation.
Yeah. Just completely transform.
Yep.
How somebody sees themselves. And like once that dynamic is nice, and that they know I see them, they know I have their best interests at heart, that's when I can start to say, except, why are you doing this again? We talked about this and you said X, Y, and Z. So here we are again. Like, what's happening? And just start challenging them, right? Obviously, a little bit. Because I also think that's one of the things any good coach needs to do.
Consistently holding up the mirror, holding them accountable. I mean, it's a part of our job. It's a part of what we're here for. It's a part of why they come to us. Otherwise, I mean, they might as well just pick up a book and read it if they want just the information without the reinforcement to it, And I'm a fan of books. I started my personal development journey with books. They're wonderful. But if you're going to enter into a relationship with a coach, you do need to be prepared for a little bit of accountability.
And the thing for me is, I don't think any of us can do this on our own. I really don't. I mean, that is a core of that's like one of my number one values is connectedness. I have my own coaches, right? Like when I see something that's happening, like right now I'm working with a functional medicine nutritionist. She is great, but I was like, I need somebody outside of me to like look at what I'm doing and to say, okay, but now how about this? Let's try some other things.
Because it does what? It provides a different perspective. We are limited by the way that we see things. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to start hosting guests on my podcast, is because these are such important topics that I care so passionately about. But by me just constantly teaching what's happening, it's constantly my perspective and my limited understanding of where I'm at in life. Bringing other people into anything provides a unique perspective, but I had to be ready to hear other people's perspectives as a host. Our clients have to be ready to hear other people's perspective when they enter into a relationship, which is why your values, connectedness, I have similar core value, but I'm also a huge advocate for people doing things when they're ready. Sometimes people aren't ready to let someone else into their journey, and that's okay. And that's okay. It's a boundary of theirs that they're setting, whether they're conscious of it or not.
Yeah. And so like the like inside baseball for me is what really introduced me to boundaries and to a lot of like my own people pleasing and those things is I was in a relationship with an alcoholic, an active alcoholic. And And it was devastating, and I am incredibly stubborn. I'm stubborn and self-reliant. And, and I just thought if I could be better, like maybe I'm not trying hard enough. And the same thing was true in my work life as it was in my personal life. Because it turns out I am also the same person everywhere I go, just like all my clients are, right? You just show up as yourself. And my prayer is that all of us, including myself, find ways to open gently to new perspectives and new possibilities. And I know from my own journey and from my clients that unfortunately that's not usually how it happens. It's like the alarm clock comes on, like that suffering alarm clock turns on, and then it gets louder and louder and louder. And then finally you have no choice, right? But to make a change. But I'm also like really, I'm so glad what you said about readiness. Because I have had clients come to me like in that panic state, like everything has to change. I need to whatever. And I'm like, this is not where you're not going to make good choices from this place. And you're going to jump from a frying pan into a fire if we try to do this work right now. Like I need you to stabilize, right? You're coming out of a highly traumatizing relationship, right? I can hear how much grief you're in. Know how hard it is to sit there. But I need you to like keep going to therapy and sit still and call me in a month,
Exactly.
And that's really, and like, so that also comes back to boundaries for me, right? Which is my limitations. I'm not God. I have no magic wand. I might have a little witchiness to me, but not that much. And that I can't help everybody. And I do turn away clients that aren't a good fit for me and refer them to other folks. And I can't transform like the entire world around you in order to make your life what you think it should be. And so it's really, I don't think about that now as, part of it certainly is readiness, but I try to check myself about like, with some clients, and I've had clients that are just so triggering for me that I had to bless and release them.
Absolutely.
That had nothing to do with who they were as a person or as a client.
It never, ever does. It's always about you and your own limitations. Because most people who enter into the coaching space, the spiritual space, the therapy space, we're givers, right? We're givers, we're helpers, we've been gifted from whatever higher power anyone believes in. We've been gifted with a superpower that is unmatched. Yep. But if you disrespect that power or let your ego take the wheel and try to help everyone with everything, it cancels out your superpower. It makes you useless. And that is incredible maturity for any young coaches in my audience who are listening right now. Listen, because this is very important. If you're at the beginning of your career, you will burn out if you do not acknowledge your limitations and set boundaries from the get-go. Please do not be like me or possibly like Vera.
Oh yeah.
And hit rock bottom and burn out and burn your coaching business to the ground and start over from scratch because you have so much resentment towards what you're doing because you didn't set those boundaries. It is something that happens. Yeah. And I'm sure, Vera, you've worked with clients who fit that profile.
Oh yeah. And I go through waves of that in my own business. And it's still for me challenging to like right now I have my coaching slots are full, right? I have, a couple people on a waiting list and I desperately want it. I'm like, oh no, I'll just take on more people. But I know, right?
Famous last words.
Right, exactly. I'm like, I don't have, it's the other reason that I want to start working with groups, right? Is like, no, I can this work is too important for it to be limited to what I can do just one-on-one with people.
Absolutely. And it's constantly, boundaries are flexible. Limitations as we grow and expand. I have a whole module in my boundaries course just on this specific topic. It's in looking at boundaries as something that moves. As maybe you're new to it, you start small and you start strict. As you grow, as you develop trust in yourself, confidence, you learn more, your capacity grows, your boundaries get to grow.
Yeah.
And maybe in the beginning of your practice, I went through a coach training program as well. And my mentors actually told me, when you first get started, you're probably going to want to do one-on-one, because that's what you're being trained to do. That's what your capacity is to hold a bubble for you and one other person. And then eventually you might realize, like I did, that that is so not how I want to run my business. It's not what I want to do. And you start setting more boundaries with it so that you can expand your capacity to hold groups or courses or write or do a podcast or whatever. And it's just constantly moving through, not even just as an entrepreneur or as a coach, but in any career field.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to grow and to outgrow things. And it's okay. And it's okay if you outgrow things. What you liked last month or last year is not what you have to want or like moving forward.
Yes.
And that's a part of the validation piece that you were saying earlier. It's okay. Like just telling your clients, it's okay. You are here. This is how you're feeling. And that's, you're okay. You're not weird for that. You're not bad for that. Doesn't mean anything about you.
Right. No. And that like the ability to, I mean, like the boundaries can be flexible, but in the beginning, I mean, it's like learning anything. Like we screw up in the beginning. Part of becoming masterful at something is making a ton of mistakes.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's probably like, that people pleasing and perfectionism, that's, I think, where it really catches up with us the fastest, is like, I can't do it wrong, right? I can't let people down. I can't be human.
Yep.
And how, I mean, that has been my experience. And like learning how to, it's like now I almost don't think of them as mistakes, but like to realize that like, okay, what's happening now is not what's ideal for me. How do I shift this?
That's a great way of looking at it.
How's the course change?
And just letting the chips fall where they're going to fall. You go into experiences and you go, okay, I'm new to this boundary setting thing. I'm new to the self-awareness thing. I'm going to try. Now, I've had people fight me on the word try. Usually it's like the military-minded perfectionist male types. They're like, there is no try. There is do or do not.
You do it or you don't do it.
You either do it or you fail, But that's so black and white. I am a huge fan of the gray, like not even gray area, the multicolored, beautiful area that is try. It doesn't have to be do or do not. You go into a situation, you say, I'm going to try to set a boundary. And maybe you totally wipe out.
Yeah.
Your conditioning kicks in, the trauma response kicks in, your nervous system conditioning kicks in, and you people please. You do what you've always done.
Yeah.
You didn't fail. You learned. It's keeping an open mind to you're constantly learning. I like to say it as you're becoming. We're always becoming. Every single moment of every day, we are becoming what we are to be. And it's just one foot in front of the other. That's what you did in your career.
Yeah.
And you left
still doing.
That's right? It's what we're all doing. We're all becoming at all times.
Yeah.
Coaching, correct me if I'm wrong. You're coaching someone who's just a couple of steps maybe behind you, right?
Yeah, often.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that'll continue happening?
I don't know. It's interesting because I have a handful of clients who I do more spiritual coaching work with. And I mean, gosh, I will say that like there comes a point with everybody where like my hope is to get to a place where we are peers, right? Something really interesting about coaching a peer, not because like I'm ahead or they're behind.
Yeah.
But because we're both humble enough to say like, I need help sometimes. And for me that like, I think that's more, cause like, I don't know. I think about my client who I told you about, like with the new job, like I don't know if I'll never be in a field like that.
That's true.
I might make that much money, maybe ever, maybe.
We're putting it out. We're going to put it out into the universe. It's possible.
I mean, I also like, I don't have a family to support. So like my needs are different, but, I just go like, nah, sometimes, but yeah, I mean, I definitely like, I have those clients who come to me because they see what I have and they want it. And so in that case, sure, right? They're, me 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 8 years ago.
But not necessarily, because a lot of beginning business owners are told niche down, like it's going to be you, who you were 5 years ago is your ideal client. Are you more, it sounds like you're more open-minded, more open to other possibilities.
I think in the same way that like when we start with boundaries, we start being much more rigid and clear and specific. And that once you're in the business for a while, you might find that like what you're doing branches out a little bit or it shifts some. So in that way, like, yes, I mean, I think that niching down is really helpful, especially in learning to communicate what we do to the people who need to hear it. But I also think it's like, because in the beginning we're like, I want to help everybody,
Yeah.
And like, so as a career coach, it's like, well, anybody with a job is potentially my client. Well, that doesn't help. That's like, that doesn't help them understand.
No.
Well, like if they're my client or not. It also does not help them understand what I might help them do. And so I think that it's really useful guidance for folks early in their career to go like, okay, because here's the thing that you're an expert at. You're an expert at being yourself. You're an expert at like the last 5 years of your transition. So that makes sense as a starting point. But yeah, I think that's part of, it's like, so then as you get more masterful and skillful and you get more information, you can start to shift.
Because everything at all times is just information being given to us.
Totally. And the only guarantee is change.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
I tell my yoga students all the time, like especially when we're like doing really uncomfortable things, whether you like it or you don't like it, it will change.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is.
Yeah. Oh man, what a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for giving so many details of the work that you do with your clients. It seems like you're just out there transforming their lives, transforming their careers, and transforming their perspective of themselves. And that's just completely incredible work. Why don't you?
Yeah, the only thing I would take credit for is that last part, because they actually are the ones transforming their lives.
You're facilitating. Yes. I would say that you're standing there with the what are those things called? The lights. Yes, whatever they are.
Oh, right, like the air traffic control.
Air traffic control.
The air horn. Glitter.
Pom poms. Whatever.
Sparkles. Flowers. I sent champagne to clients. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Why don't you tell us where we can connect with you, where we can follow you?
Yes.
On the socials.
The best place to start is honestly my website, which is just myname.com, veralester.com.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram at Vera Rocks.
Okay.
And that's probably the other place where I'm the most businessy. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can do that too. And if you want to have access to all my network, you're more than welcome to do that, because my LinkedIn video is now, 15 years old, and I was a fundraiser for many years. So I have a lot of connections. So feel free.
Yeah, I love it. And all those links, guys, I will go ahead and drop down below with the description with Vera's bio so that you can just click on a button and connect with her wherever you feel. Change of outfit, change of location, same Sarah, same day. Guys. So her power went out and the modem went out, and that is why she suddenly dropped from a call, and we were not able to do our usual exit things that I like to do with my guests, because she did have to jump on a call with a client right away. I might possibly share with y'all at some point someday a blooper reel with my face when the call dropped and I was just so confused on what the fuck was happening. But today we're not doing that. I wanted to gather myself and gather my energy so that I could come back on here and wrap up the call in the proper way. So she shared with you that you can connect with Vera on Instagram, LinkedIn, and especially through her website. So if anything she said, anything about her story, her energy, her background, her profession, what she helps with her clients with, if that resonated with you and you feel called to, definitely reach out. She's an incredible person. She would love to hear from you. Like all of my guests are incredible people who would love to hear from you, would love to hear your feedback on the episode. And yeah, our inboxes are open, so feel free to reach out. Thank you. And all the links and everything, of course, will like always be in the description with her bio underneath this episode. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of the Audacity Academy, and I will see y'all next week, hopefully with fewer technical issues. But honestly, this is not the first time tech issues have gotten to me on my podcast, and it certainly will not be the last. So flexibility, guys. We're just going to keep on going. That's all we're going to do. Bye.